Have you ever noticed that the deeper you think, the lonelier you feel? That the moment you start asking uncomfortable questions, people look away, change the subject, or quietly push you out of the circle? It's not in your head. History shows us that society has always been afraid of those who think too deeply, not because they're wrong, but because they see what others don't want to see. From the very beginning, thinkers have been treated with suspicion. Socrates was sentenced to death, not for committing crimes, but for encouraging people to question authority. Galileo was silenced for proving the earth revolved around the sun. Nikola Tesla died alone and broke, while others got rich from his ideas. The pattern repeats. The more clearly someone sees reality, the more society resists them. The philosopher Arthur Schopenhauer called this the curse of intelligence. According to him, intelligence isn't a gift that makes life easier, it's a burden that isolates. Because the clearer you see, the less you can ignore. And the less you can ignore, the harder it is to live comfortably among those who don't want to see it all. Think about how we react to different forms of superiority. When you meet someone stronger than you, you might admire them. Their muscles don't make you feel smaller. When you see someone richer than you might envy them, but it doesn't feel like a personal attack. But when you encounter someone who thinks on a higher level, something shifts. This is where psychologists bring in what's called the mirror effect. Deep thinkers unintentionally become mirrors, not showing people who they are, but revealing what they lack. And people don't forgive that easily. Pause for a second. Have you ever shared a thought, maybe a deep or complex observation, and suddenly the room goes silent? No one argues, no one asks questions, they just change the topic. That silence is not random. It's a defense mechanism. Because your words forced people to confront something they'd rather avoid. Unlike strength or wealth, intelligence cuts close to the bone. Strength is external. Wealth is external. But intelligence? It's tied directly to our identity. We see ourselves through our thoughts, our beliefs, our understanding of the world. So when someone more intelligent comes along, it doesn't feel like admiration or envy. It feels like a threat to who we are. This is why Schopenhauer argued that intelligent people often find themselves alone. Not because they want isolation, but because their very presence makes others uncomfortable. But here's the real question. Why? Why does intelligence, more than strength, beauty, or money, provoke such discomfort? Why do people feel threatened by something that could help them grow? The answer lies not in history, but in the wiring of the human brain itself. So why is it that intelligence, more than strength, beauty, or even wealth, makes people uneasy? Why do we celebrate physical power and material success, but grow silent, defensive, or even hostile around someone who simply thinks differently? The answer is simple, but uncomfortable. Intelligence threatens the very foundation of how most people see themselves. Every human being carries an ego, a fragile image of who they are, built from beliefs, experiences, and stories they tell themselves. Intelligence isn't just another trait. It's a mirror held up to that ego. When you encounter someone who thinks more sharply, questions more deeply, or sees through illusions you've always accepted, it feels like an attack on your identity. This is why people can admire a stronger body, a bigger house, or a nicer car. Those don't challenge who they are. But intelligence? Intelligence questions the stories they've built their entire lives upon. Imagine sitting in a room and casually pointing out a flaw in society, a contradiction in belief, or a truth that others ignore. To you, it's just observation. To them, it's exposure. Suddenly, you force them to look into a mirror they weren't ready for. And here's the irony. People rarely attack the truth directly. Instead, they attack the person holding the mirror. They'll label you as arrogant, overthinking, or out of touch. Not because you're wrong, but because admitting you're right would mean they must reevaluate their entire worldview. And that's far scarier than dismissing you. Think about school. How often did the kid who always raised their hand, who asked too many questions, become the target of whispers, rolled eyes, or jokes? It wasn't about the questions being wrong. It was about the discomfort those questions created in others who didn't want to feel exposed. That playground dynamic never really disappears. It just evolves into adult life, in offices, families, and even friendships. Psychologists explain this using the concept of social comparison theory. Humans are wired to constantly measure themselves against others. But when the gap feels too large, and especially when it's tied to intelligence, the brain doesn't interpret it as inspiration. It interprets it as threat. The subconscious whispers, if this person is right, then I've been wrong. If they see more clearly, then maybe I'm blind. And that thought is unbearable to the ego. This is why intelligence isolates. Not because deep thinkers push people away, but because others quietly retreat. They avoid conversations that make them uncomfortable. They distance themselves from the person who challenges their illusions. And over time, the thinker notices the silence, the side glances, the invitations that stop coming. But here's where it gets even darker. It's not just discomfort that intelligent people trigger. In many cases, intelligence provokes outright hostility. People don't just ignore the thinker, they actively try to silence them. And history shows us, again and again, what happens when truth becomes too dangerous to tolerate. Discomfort can make people pull away. But when discomfort turns into fear, fear becomes hostility. And that's when intelligence stops being seen as a gift and starts being treated like a threat. Look back through history, and you'll notice a chilling pattern. Societies rarely fear the brute force of a lone individual. What they truly fear is an idea. Empires didn't tremble because of muscles. They trembled because someone dared to think differently. Socrates questioned too much and was sentenced to death. Galileo looked at the stars, saw truth, and was silenced by the church. Innovators, reformers, writers, countless were exiled, censored, or worse, not for crimes of violence, but for crimes of thinking. Intelligence unsettles power because power thrives on stability, on people not asking too many questions. Now, you might say, that was the past. We're more advanced now. But are we? Look around. Intelligent voices online who challenge mainstream narratives often face shadow bans, mass ridicule, or character assassination. In workplaces, the employee who sees flaws in the system isn't rewarded. They're often labeled difficult or disruptive. The methods are different, but the principle is the same. When your intelligence exposes what others want hidden, you become dangerous. Here's why. When intelligence enters the room, it strips away illusions. And illusions aren't just harmless fantasies, they're survival mechanisms. People need their beliefs to feel stable. If you challenge those beliefs, they don't think, oh, I've learned something new. Their brain reacts as if under attack. The fight or flight response activates. And too often, that turns into fight. That's why intelligent individuals don't just face avoidance. They face mockery. They face dismissal. In extreme cases, they face elimination. Think about your own life. Maybe you've been in a group conversation and you noticed a flaw in what everyone was agreeing on. You spoke up, not to provoke, but simply to be honest. What happened? Maybe the room fell silent. Maybe people exchanged glances. Maybe someone laughed it off and changed the subject. In that moment, you weren't rewarded for thinking. You were punished for breaking the illusion. This is why intelligence can feel like a curse. It isolates you socially, marks you as difficult, and in some cases, makes you an enemy without you ever lifting a finger. And the cruel irony? The more honest you are, the lonelier you become. But here's the twist most people don't see. What feels like weakness, this isolation, this hostility, is actually where the deepest form of power begins. Because when you no longer belong to the crowd, you stop living under its control. So yes, intelligence can make you an outsider. It can strip away illusions, cost you relationships, and make you a target. But here's the paradox no one tells you. That very isolation is what transforms intelligence from a curse into a weapon. When you're on the outside, you see what insiders can't. You're not trapped in the noise of the crowd, the pressure of belonging, or the blindness of groupthink. You see patterns, motives, and truths that others ignore. And once you've seen them, you can't unsee them. This distance gives you clarity. Clarity gives you choice. And choice is the foundation of power. Think of it like a chessboard. Most people live as pawns, moving in the direction they're told, reacting instead of thinking. But intelligence, sharpened by solitude, lets you step off the board and look at the whole game. You stop reacting to moves. You start anticipating them. That's why throughout history, the thinkers, The observers, the so-called outcasts, often became the very people who reshaped the world. They weren't distracted by approval. They weren't blinded by conformity. They saw clearly and acted precisely. And here's where it comes back to you. If you've ever felt that your questions, your doubts, or your way of seeing things pushed people away, don't mistake that for weakness. That discomfort you create in others is proof of your clarity. And your isolation? That's not emptiness. That's space. Space to grow, to think, to build something untouchable. When you no longer need to argue, when you don't rush to defend yourself, when silence becomes your default response, people notice. They may not admit it, but they feel it. That stillness radiates authority. It unsettles attackers, commands respect, and creates a kind of gravity. You don't need to shout. You don't even need to win debates. You simply exist in truth. And that, more than anything else, makes you untouchable. So here's the reality. Intelligence will always carry a price. It will make you uncomfortable, and it will make others uncomfortable too. It will isolate you, expose you, and yes, sometimes even endanger you. But it will also free you. It will sharpen you. It will place you outside the prison of illusions where most people spend their lives. And once you're out, you don't go back. The question isn't whether intelligence isolates. It does. The real question is, what will you do with that isolation? Will you treat it like a burden, or will you use it as your foundation of power? Because in a world built on lies, to think clearly is the rarest rebellion. And once you master that rebellion, you don't need the crowd needs you.